So, Brent, then you went on to fly the F-16 with the US Air Force. How did this exchange come about?
It was kind of an interesting story. So I had been offered the opportunity while I was deployed. Top Gun transitioned to what was called NSOC, the Naval Strike Air Warfare Center. They closed down at Miramar and transitioned up to Fallon. And the transition was a little rough, particularly, and at this time, and they also included F-18s and what was Top
Right,
Gun or
yeah.
now NSOC. The F-18s made the transition very well. The F-14s a little less so. Um, and so that was one issue with what Top Gun was and what it had become. The other issue was that the Navy had started. Our original commitment was we were committed to stay in the Navy 7 years after we got our wings. The Navy made a huge investment for this. It was fine. Everybody signed up for it. No big deal.
Yeah.
But along the way, they made a change right before I was scheduled to go where they said, hey, if you go to Top Gun or go to the Blue Angels, which I wasn't eligible for that at the time, we're going to add 2 years to that commitment. And that was the timing of that. It was not handled well. So I had a friend that had gone to the Top Gun class or NSOC class before I was supposed to go. Talked to him, and I was kind of like, I don't know that that's what I want to do. And so I kind of politely declined, which was not viewed very favorably. It's like, nobody turns this down. And I was like, it was a good decision. So nobody knew what was going to happen to me. In the meantime, one of the guys from my first squadron, Dave Lobdell Beaker, he was one of my first flight leads, world-class aviator, had been picked, had gone through an interview process to do an Air Force exchange tour, and he was the first ever exchange pilot to fly the F-117. And I know
Wow.
you're going to be interviewing an F-117 pilot here soon. So Beaker was the first ever exchange pilot to fly the Black Jet at Holloman Air Force Base.
Wow.
And I had stayed in touch with Beaker, and he was having a great time. They treated him fabulously. Kind of weird. He actually met his wife at Hollywood. He couldn't find a wife in San Diego, California, but out in the middle of New Mexico, we found the
Yeah.
future Mrs. Lobdell, wonderful gal. So he spoke real well of it, and in the Navy and the Air Force exchange, there were a total of 8 pilots involved in it, and they were pretty selective about who they sent and where they sent them. Um, and so I had mentioned to the detailer in Washington, hey, I don't know if these are ever an opportunity. He goes, man, those are very rare. Don't know. Talked to the squadron commander who was not particularly happy with me. And then all of a sudden the phone rang one day, and it was the guy in Washington. He goes, hey, how would you feel about flying F-16s at Shaw Air Force Base? You meet all the criteria. He goes, you're going to have to go through the interview process with the Air Force, but the Navy's willing to support you through this. And my first question, I didn't know where Shaw was. I go, is that in America? He goes, yeah, he laughed. He goes, South Carolina. I'm like, great, love to. And he goes, okay. He goes, you're going to get an email from somebody back there. And I was contacted by a gentleman who's now passed away, one of the greatest men I'd ever met, Lieutenant Colonel Mike Cookie Cook. And Cookie was he was the fighter pilot, old school Southern boy he was from South Carolina. And he calls me up. He goes, Guido, this is Cookie. And I'm like, holy shit, sir. He goes, I really want you. And he goes, here's the story. He goes, he had been an exchange pilot and flown F-16s with the Netherlands. So he didn't just do an exchange in America. He went to another country and thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And he was taking over the 77th Fighter Squadron at Shaw, and they were due to get a new exchange pilot. And he pounded the table that he wanted him. He goes, I want the exchange pilot. I want him in my squadron. And he goes, I need you to send me your resume. I'm like, a resume? I'm in the Navy. We don't do resumes. He goes, well, send me something. So I basically made a table on a Word document of my flying experience and qualifications, sent it off to him. Got a call back from Washington. They said, "Hey, you passed the test with these guys, and you're gonna go to Shaw and fly F-16." So it's somewhat of a prestigious selection. I was honored. I was glad I got to do it.
So did you know, obviously you know what where you were going and stuff like that, but did you know much about the F-16, what block you were going on to fly and what the mission was?
And I could barely spell F-16. I was just happy to be gonna go fly a newer airplane, and it sounded like an adventure to me. So even checking in at this, so I'm in San Diego, and it's kind of a weird deal because my ultimate destination is Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina on the opposite side of the country. But I'm going to get trained in the F-16 Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, which is like a 6-8 hour drive away from San Diego. And my orders read go to Shaw, and then they're going to turn around and send you back to Arizona. And I'm like, this makes zero sense at all. So I've been the kind of guy where I would rather ask forgiveness than. So I drive my truck conveniently to the Air Force Base, park it in a parking lot, get a ride to the airport, buy a plane ticket, fly to South Carolina. so
Wow.
so I go to check in. So I get it. I take a cab or whatever. Go to Shaw Air Force Base, and it's like late in the evening. So I want to make a good first impression. I think anybody would want to. So I am in service. I get up 6 o'clock in the morning, middle of the week. Service dress blues, the double-breasted, tie on, all the, I've been there, done that ribbons, the gold wings. I mean, just, the white cover, and I've got a nice briefcase and everything. And so I go strolling over to the 77th Fighter Squadron. It's still dark out in the morning. Knock on the door, walk in, and there's a bunch of guys getting ready to brief. They're all there in their flight suits, and they literally like, "What the what are you?" And Cookie hadn't told these guys that they were getting an exchange pilot.
That's brilliant.
And so I go, "Is this the 77th Fighter Squadron?" And they're like, "Yeah, what are you doing here? Who the hell are you?" I said, "I'm your new exchange pilot." And they're like, "What?" And they're like getting on the intercom, like, "Everybody come up here. You got to see this." Because I'm standing there in my service dress blues. And this goes on for a little while. And then the director of operations, the second in command, Sal Kalura, another just great American, he's like, "What are you and what is this costume?" And about that time, Colonel Cook comes walking in, and he is laughing hysterically. He goes, "I see y'all met the new guy. Guido, get in here." And we went and sat in his office, and then called one of the guys, and he goes, "Go get him in a flight suit with some real patches and get him out of this costume." So that was my welcome aboard to the 77th Fighter Squadron.
Yeah, so let's get into some of your training on the F-16. Like, talk us through your first thoughts on the jet.
So a real unique situation. So Shaw, the 20th Fighter Wing, was getting brand new F-16s. They were getting Block 50, the CJ, which was the Wild Weasel, which we specialized in suppression of enemy air defenses, SEAD. Our job was to hunt and kill surface-to-air missiles. Which was a very, very high visibility mission all over the place, but particularly with the Air Force. This was the Air Force's newest baby. Our squadron was literally picking these very cutting edge, mission specific aircraft up from the factory. I mean, it was going to be amazing, but I had to go out to Luke to get trained in the F-16. Now, here was the problem. The Air Force did not buy any Block 50s to be used for training. They only bought. So I go out to Luke. So first of all, I'm considered an experienced fighter pilot. So I'm going to go through an abbreviated syllabus. I think we got maybe 40 hours in the airplane. It wasn't much. It was quality training, but it was not a lot of. And I flew the Block 42, which was a missionized air-to-ground airplane with Pratt & Whitney engines. We flew the Lantern jets. It was completely random. And there was like this class of like cats and dogs. It was the funniest thing in the world. I went to the 310th Fighter Squadron, which was not designed to do initial training in the F-16. They had no idea what to do with us, and there was like 5 of us. There were 2 A-10 guys, an F-111 guy who'd flown the F-117, me, and then a Navy Hornet guy who was going off to some black program still talk about, but he had to get qualified in the F-16. So you've got a Navy Hornet guy, a Navy Tomcat guy, 2 A-10 guys, and an F-111 guy who'd flown the F-117, all getting sent to a squadron at Luke that had never done initial training in the F-16. So, and it was going to be a hoot, and we ended up having a blast. It was some of the greatest time of my life out there. I didn't have a ground job. It just, if I didn't know what was going on, I'm like, I could always just throw the Navy card, and I didn't know that. But they treated us great. Loved the airplane right away. The flight controls took some getting used to. You sit down and you're like, holy cow, it's a joystick over here on the side of the cockpit. After about an hour in the simulator, why doesn't every airplane built like this? This is like the greatest cockpit layout ever. So user friendly. The flight controls took some getting used to, and it was the same way for all of us in my class, to where you'd be about 30, 40 minutes into the first simulator, and you're fighting the flight controls because you don't fly the airplane in the F-16, you vote. Yeah. The stick is a pressure sensor. It's just a joystick. You command it by the amount of pressure you put on it, and the airplane decides what to do, and it decides very well. So finally, I'm trying to fly on my very first ever approach in the simulator, and the simulator instructor's like, all right, does this old civilian guy, puts it on freeze, and he comes walking up. He goes, knock this shit off. And he goes, I want you to take the tip of your finger, put it on top of the stick. I'm like, yes, sir. And he goes, that's the only thing I want touching that stick is the tip of your finger. Now finish flying the approach. And I'm like, are you out of your damn mind? But it made me learn how delicate and sensitive the flight controls were in that airplane. And I finished the approach with just the tip of my finger, and the light bulb came on. And after that, I thought that the F-16 and the flight controls were the greatest invention, since the Writers. So the funny story was, the F-15s, the demonstrators, the stick didn't move at all. And the test pilots were like, this is not going to work. At least so it only moved 1/8 of an inch. There was nothing to yank on. The stick barely moved. It was just a pressure sensor. It's not, you had no interaction with the flight controls whatsoever, no feedback, which was a problem in the airplane. In the F-14, you could feel kind of the forces through the stick. So you could be looking back over your shoulder, looking out of the cockpit or whatever, and you got feedback through the stick and the flight controls of how fast the airplane was and everything. Not with the F-16. You could look back over your shoulder, you'd be doing 100 knots or 700, and the airplane felt the exact same way. There was no difference. So you didn't get that tactile feedback in the F-16.
And I have to ask, obviously your first afterburner takeoff in the F-16, could you feel the power difference coming from the Tomcat in that regime?
In the Block 42s, not so much, because the airplanes had, again, this squadron was not designed for initial training, so we frequently flew the airplanes with 2 fuel tanks on it, and the Pratt & Whitney motors, they were a little bit better than what was in the Tomcat, but not a lot. It wasn't like this, oh my gosh, eye-opening experience in the Block 42. There definitely were some differences. Getting used to flying single seat again, talking on the radio. I think I'd talked on the radio once in 4 years. So the first couple times, it's like key mic, you're like, it came back pretty quick, but it was funny. And all the other guys in my class were single seat guys, and I was the only one that had come from a 2-seat airplane. And so it was always kind of funny, me trying to talk on the radio the first flight or two, gave the guys a good laugh. But it came back pretty quick.
What were the similarities and differences coming from the U.S. Navy and specifically the Tomcat community?
There were zero. The only similarities were that the front end of the jet sucks and the back end blows. I mean, other than that, there is zero. Right. It was the most amazing thing, and I still think about this to the day. There was not one term that was the same between the Air Force and the Navy. Rendezvous was rejoin, division was 4 ships, section was 2 ships. The language barrier, I would have to call a knock it off in the brief. I'm like, what in the hell are we talking about? I'm like, wasn't that what? I'm like, no. And so so you had to go through this kind of initial phase with the instructors of a normal brief, it would take an hour. It took me an hour and a half. I'm like, just what does that mean? Where are we going? What are you talking about? And so that was, and they're literally, to this day, I cannot, even the way they pronounce it, okay, suppression of enemy air defenses, SEAD. One service pronounced it SEAD, the other one pronounced it SEAD. I'm like, come on. I mean, it just is 4 letters. How hard could this be? So everything was different. Even something's kind of funny. I mentioned my jacket. In the Air Force, the guys would take the patches from their old squadrons and airplanes and stuff. They would put those on their helmet bags and never put a patch on their jacket. In the Navy, you put all the patches on your jacket and nothing on the helmet bag.
Right.
It's like, come on, guys, we cannot get anything to do the same. So it was a huge learning curve. Just the language barrier. But I mean, by the time I think I'd been through like the first 5 or 6 rides, I was bilingual at that point, so I could speak both languages. I could talk on the radio, and it all came pretty naturally. The airplane's a wonderful jet to fly, absolutely phenomenal aircraft to fly. The instructors were world class. And you go through just a basic spin up. It's like you're qualified in the airplane. They got us qualified to, get gas off the boom, which clearly is not near as hard as the Navy, but still it's not that a lot of the Navy guys are like, oh, ha, ha, ha. I'm like, I'm going to tell you what, at night in the clouds, tanking on a boom is not all, I mean, it's easier, but don't get this idea, you're up there with your mask off, drinking a Diet Coke and having a granola bar or a Pop-Tart or something. I mean, it's work. So then we go, so I get the basically, basic checkout. I think it's about 4 months at Luke Air Force Base. Jump in the truck, drive back to Shaw. So now I show up to Shaw and I'm qualified in the F-16. Now is when things start to get interesting because the Air Force had not bought any training versions of the Block 50. You show up to your Block 50 squadron. You've never seen this radar. It actually has different flight controls. The airplane flies the same, but it's a different system. You've never seen this engine before. You've never seen the AGM-88 high-speed anti-radiation missile that we use to shoot surface-to-air missile sites. Different versions of AMRAAM. I mean, everything is new. So they have to actually run within the Block 50 squadrons like a separate spin-up program, and it's 11 or 12 flights. Now, when you talk about getting used to a new engine, the GE, the F1, the 129 motor was ridiculous. It was the biggest engine ever put in a fighter at that point. It was mid-90s. So this is pre-F-22, pre-F-35. The thrust on this thing, you've got, the F-16 is a 27,000, 20 nominally, in the air-to-air configure around 27.5. I'm pulling this out of my head. So if any of your viewers are like, oh, he's full of shit, he might be. 27,000-ish pounds, Block 50, sitting there, with me strapped into it, with an engine that at sea level is in the 30 to 31,000 pound thrust class.
Wow.
This thing is an absolute rocket ship. Now, you talk about getting used to an engine. The first time taking off, no afterburner in a Block 50, you talk about getting rocked back in the seat and things happening very quickly. That was unreal. That first flight in a Block 50 was an absolute eye-opener with that engine. And then it's going to be my first BFM flight. This is kind of embarrassing, but it's a good story. They're thinking, F-14 guy, great air-to-air background and everything. So I'm going to go up and, we're going to do basic fighter maneuvers and I'm offensive. Well, in the F-14 and even in the Block 42 F-16s out at Luke, basically you put the aircraft in afterburner, you left it there, until you started picking up closure into a gun solution, then, idle boards, work the closure, work the gun solution. You do that in a Block 50, and it's like you're supersonic hitting the turn circle. You are arcing across half of the state of South Carolina. Wow. Because you're so fast, even at 9 Gs. And the defensive guy knows you're going to do this because it's your first time. He goes idle boards, reverses, and neutralizes. And you go, hold up. 15, 20 seconds ago, I'm 3/4 of a mile behind you staring at your tailpipe, and now you've just neutralized me. So, and sure enough, I got humbled on my first BFM ride. We come back and land, and I can see the guy's face, can't remember his name, and he's laughing at me the whole way. But it's spirited. And he goes, man, I thought the Tomcat guy would have it sorted out. And I'm like, no, bro, we got to talk. So he went in, and he was a very good instructor, very patient with me. He goes, no, you've got to fly this airplane with your left hand also. And once the light bulb came on from that point forward, loved the airplane, loved the engine, loved the mission. It was a great mission. I really enjoyed it.
What does the J stand for in F-16CJ? Is it jamming or?
I don't know. Go ask the Air Force. The Block 40s were the Block 40 was the F-16CG and the Block 50 was the F-16CJ.
Yeah,
So,
I'm still yet to find an answer.
yeah.
So yeah, did you ever get to do DACT in the CJ? And yeah, obviously it must have been like a
Oh
dogfighting
gosh,
monster.
yeah, we regularly flew against the Marine F-18s out of Beaufort, South
Nice.
Carolina. We trained with them a lot. Sometimes we would be adversaries for them; they would be adversaries for us. I loved every minute of it because in the F-14, trying to gun an F-18 was pretty hard. In a Block 50 Viper, it was just a matter of how fast you could go pull it off. So nobody in the 77th Fighter Squadron loved coming back and playing the HUD tape of running an F-18 over and over like the Tomcat guy did. So
Yeah.
that was so we did a lot of that. Um, Flew against the Eagles. We were actually deployed. We were in Bahrain, and the flying had gotten kind of slow. We got over there, the flying was real busy, and the flying got kind of slow. And the Eagle guys that were with us, they were out of Tyndall, I believe, out of Florida. Good group of guys. Came over and said, "Hey, we got to do some upgrades. Can you guys, maybe support us with some adversaries, and then we'll be adversaries for you or whatever."
Mhm.
We're like, "Sure." So I got to go out and fight. It was me 1v2 against two Eagles, and it was an upgrade flight for the flight lead. I think I sent you one of the pictures from. It's actually the picture of me standing, getting ready to man up the F-16. If
Oh
you look in
yes.
the background, you'll notice the jet has all the weapons rails on it, but there's no weapons on it. So the jet, we couldn't fly DACT and be armed. So I went out and got to fight the Eagles then, and then went to the great thing and the bad thing about the Block 50 was we were the high demand, high visibility squadrons for the Air Force. So most guys are lucky to do red flag once in a tour. I went to
Yeah.
red flag 3 times.
Wow.
And it's a beating. It is such work at red flag, especially for the Block 50 guys. Multiple deployments, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia twice. We were busy, so we were gone a lot. We flew a lot. The airplanes were brand new. They never broke. I think in the entire time I flew the Block 50, the only two airborne issues I had one time, had a battery light out at Nellis Air Force Base, which is kind of a big deal in that airplane. Not as It's a big deal if just the battery light comes on, everything's okay. If the battery light and anything else goes wrong, you're about to have a super bad day in that jet.
Right.
Um, and then I can't remember, I believe it was fluctuating fuel pressure one day back at Shaw, and had to declare an emergency for that. Those were the only two issues I ever had in the airplane. And then one other time, the only maintenance discrepancy I had besides those 2 times was I had a light burnout. I mean, the airplanes were brand new. Lockheed
Yeah.
Martin builds a phenomenal airplane. I went from flying Tomcats with 5, 6, 7,000 hours on the airframes to flying F-16s with 50 hours. You got in it literally. I can remember getting into F-16s that we just picked up from the factory that smelled like a new car.
Yeah, I've
It
heard
was
that
it was
before. Yeah.
wild. So yeah, so we flew a lot, which was great.
And did you enjoy that kind of mission the F-16 had, the CJ?
Loved the mission. Absolutely loved the mission. A lot of guys didn't. A lot of guys were like, we don't want to go do this harm stuff. We don't want to do this seed and all this kind of stuff. I loved it. I was very fortunate. I had great weapons officers. Two of them that were very influential in my F-16 career: Dave Brenton, Gripper, and Clay Garrison, Slam. Slam especially. Slam is an absolute world-class weapons officer. And their mindset was, we are force protection. If you just think about, we're supposed to go out here and, go do, dodge surface to air missiles, you're thinking about it the wrong way. So we had a force protection mindset. We got involved in a lot of interesting things, like even out at Nellis, one time I got to be the mission commander where we simulated, an aviator had been downed, and the PJs, the parajumpers, they were C-130 to pick this guy
Hmm.
up, and it was my responsibility to plan how we were going to maintain air superiority with a surface air missile threat. It was a huge mission, very complex, but I loved it. The aircraft performed well. We integrated with the Eagles more than the rest of the Air Force did, because the Eagles were like, hey, we're not going to go inside SAM rings. It's like, that's kind of what we do. So if we had to fight our way into a SAM ring, so be it. So we had a much more of an air-to-air emphasis than I think the rest of the F-16 community, in my opinion. Others may feel differently. And so with my Tomcat background and explaining like intercept timelines and some things like that, and how to employ AMRAAM at range and things like that would transfer over from the Phoenix, I got to make a contribution to the squadron in the air-to-air arena. And I love the mission. I really enjoyed the Block 50 Wild Weasel. I embraced it. Not everybody did. That was good business.
Brent, let's talk about the social side. Did you feel integrated into the squadron? You weren't just the token Navy guy, it's like, oh, give him something to do. But did you feel part of like the original squadron?
Absolutely. Now, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, the first couple of days, I definitely gave the squadron some laughs. And again, going back to where the Air Force and the Navy don't share the same terms about anything. The squadron commander in the Air Force squadron is called the boss. In the Navy, it's the skipper, and I called the boss the skipper one time. That hilarity ensued. They were good spirit about it, and I would always use the wrong term or say something dumb or whatever. And then the Air Force has got rules and regulations for like everything.
Yeah.
And I didn't know any of them. I figured if I colored outside the lines, I'd get in trouble. I colored outside the lines one day unknowingly. I came to work on Thursday, and the schedules officer comes around and goes, "Hey Guido, you're leading this 4-ship tomorrow, Friday." He goes, "I need you to save gas, and you guys are going to do the flyby for the University of South Carolina graduation." And I'm like, cool. They go, "You've done one of those before." Always lie. Never tell. If it's a good deal and I did that all the time. Back, it's like, did the flyby at the Super Bowl, just whatever. Just, it was going to be fun. Lie and say that you've done it before. So I go back. I got my 1 to 50,000 charts. They go, "Hey, here's the phone number to air traffic control," because this is up in Columbia, South Carolina. So call them. Go through the deconfliction, which was going to be challenging because of where the football stadium, where the graduation was going on, and where we were going to have to approach from conflicted with the approach corridor for the airport in Columbia. So they're like, "Hey, can you kind of work this timing and everything?" I'm like, "Gosh, I don't have enough else." Call my point of contact at the university. It was an Air Force ROTC cadet. He was like, he thought it was going to be the greatest thing in the world to be like, talking to an F-16 guy. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But I'm like, hey, it's throw the rule book out the window. So I get the guys together. We're briefing. The actual mission brief we cut kind of short because we were saving gas to do this flyby. Then one of the guys pipes up and he goes, "What formation are we going to fly over in?" I'm like, we fingertip. He goes, "Can we do a diamond?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, we're going to go do the diamond." I'm flying a diamond. Never, I'm like, and I'm once again lying about everything. "Oh, sure, we do that all the time."
Yeah.
Like, never done this before. So finish the mission, check in with Columbia approach, talk to the point of contact. "We're ready, sir, push." Throw the boys in the diamond, and we come over. I'm not going to say how low we were. I turned off the radar altimeter because I didn't want to listen to that bullshit. We were absolutely hauling the mail. Made sure that everybody in the stadium got to see their tax dollars at work. And everybody could hear us for miles. We were over 500 knots when we crossed the stadium.
Wow.
So, I mean, you got 4 F-16s that close together. We were, that's like 96, 97% on the throttle in a Block 50. Air to ground configured. This sounds like, a freight train going supersonic across a football stadium. We pull up, come back, land, and there's the squadron commander and the wing commander. And I'm like, "Hey, they go, "How'd the flyby go?" So, "Fine, sir. Point of contact. We were, real good." And the wing commander, "What formation you were in?" "Oh, sir, we were in the diamond. I made sure the guys were tucked in nice and tight and everything." And about this time, I feel my 3 wingmen are like backing up, and I'm like, And so come to find out, there is some instruction, or there used to be in the Air Force, the only people that are allowed to fly the diamond were the Thunderbirds.
No, really?
So I turn around and look at them, I'm like, who knew about all this? And they're like, basically all of them knew it, but they just wanted to see what it was like to fly in the Diamond. So I got grounded and sent to the tower for a day. So, but I was one of the guys, after the first thing, we had a mission to do. I was actually a flight commander. I had 10 or 12 Air Force guys that worked for me. I was writing Air Force officer performance reports.
Wow.
And which was odd, but they coached me through it. I was one of the guys. I was a mission commander. I led missions over Iraq. I led missions at Red Flag. My wings were a different color, and I would say something funny every once in a while. But other than that, I mean, there was just no difference. I can't say enough about how professionally and hospitable the Air Force was to me.
Yeah, that's amazing. So overall, how many hours did you get on the F-16? And obviously, you had a great time.
In the Viper, I want to say I'm 900 in the Tomcat, 600, a little over 600 in the Viper.
Got a couple of personal questions to wrap here, Brent, if you're happy with those.
Sure.
So, do you still keep in contact with your old squadron mates from both sides, obviously the Navy and the US Air Force?
On the Air Force side, not as close. We kind of scattered to the wind. Mostly, like, see them on LinkedIn once in a while. Congratulate them on work anniversaries and stuff like that. Great guys. We didn't stay that close. On the Navy side, a couple of my Rios stay in very close contact with. Matt Sturgis Chig will be in town in a couple of weeks. Flew many missions over Iraq with him. So we'll get together for dinner and kind of talk about some of the old days. Another one of our Rios works for Lockheed Martin. He lives up in the Flower Mound area. We get to see each other maybe once a year or so. So yeah, stay in touch with some of the guys.
Cool stuff.
And then some of the guys too, unfortunately, two of the greatest pilots, good friends of mine, passed away from cancer. And one of my squadron commanders and one of my Rios, we get together and go hog hunting out in Hunt County once a year. So yeah, we stay in touch a little bit.
So do you have any hobbies?
Avid bike rider. I'm taking a break. I've got a new bike ordered right now because I wrecked the last one in an unfortunate accident 3 weeks ago. Like to shoot competitively. And then I do a lot of volunteering and ministry. Kerygma Ventures is a ministry that I support actively. In fact, I'll be out this weekend doing a long-range shooting project. We're going to have some men come out. Great time to kind of get them out in the country, talk long-range shooting, talk about the gospel and things like that are important to me.
I think I know the answer to this one, but I get surprised all the time here, Brent. Favorite aircraft you have flown?
I get asked that all the time, and honestly, it depends on the day of the week. There's so many great things. The A4 was wonderful, tight handling little sports car. The Tomcat, I mean, that's just a jet. I mean, the thing. I mean, it's the sexiest thing that ever taxied. The team concept. It was just unfortunate that I only got to fly the oldest versions of the airplane. And you got to fly that off a ship. I mean, the most fun you'll have with your clothes on is landing on an aircraft carrier in the daytime. Nighttime, a little less so. I would have to say, though, literally probably the F-16, just because it's hard to describe getting into brand new airplanes with cutting edge technology. I mean, every piece of technology that existed at the time that we wanted, we got. The Air Force did a great job in the airplane. So, I mean, gun to my head, I'm the Viper just because it was brand new and everything worked all the time.
When you would like to fly either past or present?
I would give anything to go fly an F-22. I mean, that's that's God's airplane. Yeah, if I had a chance, I would probably pass out if I could just go get in a simulator for an hour.
Yeah, because I get a lot of SR-71 as well, but the F-22, yeah, that
I mean, the SR would be cool, but I mean, I don't know I had a friend of mine that flew the U-2, actually two guys that flew the U-2, in the whole pre-flight and the pressure suit, and then your nose starts to itch, and man, I don't know about all that. I mean, it's like, I get, I'm like, all right, I guess the whole idea of you can say, you were 80 plus thousand feet, three times the speed of sound, try to touch the canopy and it's red hot. I mean, I guess, but I don't know. The F-22, I mean, just because, that was the airplane from a technology standpoint, and knowing what, the DNA is of the F-22, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, can we find you online anywhere?
I've got a small presence on LinkedIn. I visit there occasionally, but the biggest thing is Black Lion CTA on Twitter. I'm a big contributor into the financial Twitter community. So if you're going there looking for great aviation stories, probably not a great source for that. I mean, I'll go out every once in a while, or I'll retweet, one of your interviews. A great guy, Tomcat Junkie. He came to town. We actually had dinner together. Wonderful nice. Dude. Yeah. So Black Lion CTA on Twitter, hit me up there. Be the occasional aviation post. Always happy to answer questions. And even though it was a long time ago I flew them, I actually have all of my manuals for both the F-14 and the F-16. So if I don't know it off the top of my head, I'll go look it up and maybe post a picture of the manual online.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Brent, thank you very much for coming on the show. I mean, we've only scratched the surface here, but if you ever want to come back on to go in more detail, that would be great. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Mike, thanks for having me. And yeah, if you ever want to do a follow-up, if any of your viewers are like, hey, have him back, and they send you a list of questions, let's do it, man. Always happy to support the aviation community.
Great stuff. Cheers, Matt.